Okay, listen up. To you, Washington, D.C. may seem like a faraway place, a city you only read about in the paper or hear about on the nightly news.
Not a day goes by without something wild and crazy or internationally important breaking in this city.
Are you still listening?
Good, because now you have a chance to win an all-expense-paid trip to our nation's capital city.
You heard that right. We're talking free. No cost. Nada.
Are you still listening?
Well, good. And if you're not really sure, then check this out.
It's the Youth Tour. Monuments, music, memories, and more.
And it's definitely something you don't want to miss. For more than 40 years, the Electric Cooperatives of Texas have been sending Lone Star State teenagers to Washington, D.C. on the Government in Action Youth Tour. Yeah, your mom and dad danced like that. Hard to believe, isn't it? For many folks who went on this trip, it was the experience of a lifetime.
Well, your chance is now. Wake up, listen up, and find out what it's like to be on the youth tour. Then, do whatever it takes to get here next year, because this trip is a pedal to the metal, eat and run, non-stop, action-packed adventure.
When I found out I was going to Washington, I was really excited. Then they told me I had to ride on a bus for 3 days to get there. But it was way cool. We rolled down the road in these scenic cruisers, watched movies, and visited with our friends. And of course, slept a bunch.
The first thing we do when we finally get to D.C. is head over to the Washington Monument. You want to talk about tall? This baby is tall. 555 feet to be exact. That makes it the tallest stone structure in the world. It was built in honor of our nation's first president, George Washington. From the top you get a panoramic view of the city and all the places we will be visiting while we are here.
The Library of Congress is headquartered in the Jefferson Building, which is one of the most beautiful buildings in this city. At the time of its construction, it was the most expensive building in the world, yet it still came in under budget. The architecture in this building is very beautiful and gives a feeling of history and of enrichment.
The fastest way to make money is to print it, and that's just what they do here at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Every hour, millions of these little things roll off the printing presses. They're inspected, cut, and bundled and shipped to your local bank. I thought I could shortcut that trip and pick up a bunch while I was here. They don't give out samples.
One thing we do regularly on the youth tour is eat. And the old post office is a really cool place that we stopped by a couple times to chow down and buy some pretty interesting gifts. You can buy almost any kind of food here, as well as buy some very interesting souvenirs. And the bell tower offers a bird's eye view of the city up close.
Standing on the steps of the Capitol is overwhelming. You can't help but think of all the great Americans who have stood in the same exact spot throughout the history of this country. Having your picture taken here makes you a part of that history. It's just another magical stop on the monuments, music, memories, and more journey.
No other building represents freedom and democracy more than the Capitol building. Around the world, this place represents the interest of the common man. Inside are spectacular paintings that tell famous stories of American history. At the top of the rotunda sits George Washington, surrounded by angels, looking down on all who visit. It truly is an amazing building.
One of the highlights of the youth tour is getting to meet with our congressman. We get to ask him questions about important issues of the day and get an inside look at how Congress works.
You know, our job is to represent people. I've got 566,000 constituents. My job is to be their go-between between the federal government and themselves. And many times when they're trying to have a problem with the federal government, or they're trying to work through something or trying to get something fixed, and they just, you know, are frustrated and feel like they're at rope's end, they'll come to us. And while we can't dictate, or we can't always, you know, make for sure that the outcome is like they want it, My job is to try to do what I can in their behalf.
The National Archives houses some of the most important documents from our nation's past. Included in them is the Declaration of Independence, which created the United States, and the Constitution that guarantees our freedoms. Visiting this place reminds you of what a privilege it is to be an American, and the responsibilities we have to pass these freedoms on to future generations. Remember, you could be here next June.
Every night on the youth tour, we get together and have a sing thing. It's a chance for us to let our hair down and have a little fun with our friends. Choir 101, this ain't, but we do sound pretty good for amateurs.
Okay, I'm not supposed to let you in on this, but I'll tell you about our tour of the FBI building. We got to see state-of-the-art forensic laboratories, learn more about some of history's most notorious criminals, and see a live arms firing demonstration. They even gave us the target when they were through. I'd like to tell you more, but if I did, I'd have to shoot you.
Ford's Theater is the place where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in April 1865. One shot from a small pistol killed the president and changed the course of history.
The presidential box looks the same today as it did on that night. Downstairs is a museum that houses the coat the president was wearing and the gun Booth used to kill him. It's American history come to life on the youth tour.
The Washington National Cathedral is an idea first conceived by George Washington. It was his idea to have a place where all Americans could come and worship. It took more than 80 years to complete this structure, which was built entirely from donations.
Inside, this place dazzles the eyes and lifts the spirit. The beauty is literally breathtaking. It was interesting to find out that this masterpiece contains Texas limestone. Throughout, the many stained glass windows depict stories from the Bible to modern-day times. There's even a window that has a rock from the moon in it.
We got to go to a musical play at Ford's Theater called Under the Kudzu. To be honest with you, I thought I was going to catch a couple-hour nap during the performance, but it turned out to be one of my favorite events on the trip. It was really amazing. The music was great and the actors were really entertaining.
On Rural Youth Day, all the states attend a meeting where we learn about electric cooperatives, discuss national issues that affect our generation, and match wits in the energy battle.
Washing your clothes in warm or cold water is more efficient than washing in hot water. True. All right, let's go!
The Smithsonian Institution is sometimes referred to as America's Attic. It is the world's largest museum complex and has more visitors than any other tourist center in the nation.
And the most visited museum in the world is the Air and Space Museum, where you can find every type of flying machine imaginable on display. Starting with the very first flying contraption, the Wright Flyer. It was less than 100 years ago when this machine first carried mankind into the sky.
Also housed here is the Spirit of St. Louis, which was the first plane to cross the Atlantic in 1927. And next to it is General Chuck Yeager's X-1, which was the first plane to break the sound barrier. There are also several spacecraft on display here. If you're into the flying thing, you definitely need to check this place out in person.
For all of the sophisticated and well-refined types, there's the National Art Gallery, which houses some of the finest artwork in the world. The aura that surrounds one while visiting is like a swirling kaleidoscope of color and form that visually excites the eye and stimulates the mind. I've got some pretty good-looking statues, too.
You know the famous old saying that diamonds are a girl's best friend? Well, here's the bestest friend any girl could ever have, the Hope Diamond. Wow, is all I can say. It's in the Natural History Museum, along with outstanding examples of the animal kingdom and exhibits of how mankind was living not that long ago. I wonder if this lady ever thought of diamonds.
You know, America is a relatively young country when you think about it, but the contributions we've made to modern life have been astounding. In the American History Museum, you can see some of those contributions and get an idea of what life was like for the generations that preceded us.
After all the touring and visiting, we finally got to let our hair down at one big dance. All the states were there and we rocked the place until they made us leave. Of course, the folks from Texas really showed them how it was done.
Mount Vernon is the home of George Washington. He loved this place with a passion that is unrivaled in American history. Walking through the house gives you the opportunity to see what everyday life was like for him. More than 80% of this place is original. It does something to you when you rub your hand across the banister and realize he touched the same wood.
Not far away from the mansion at Mount Vernon is the final resting place of the father of our country. Normally, visitors only get to view the crypt from behind double-barred gates, but we got to do something truly special on the youth tour.
We got the chance to lay a wreath at the tomb of General Washington. Standing so close to the crypt gave me a feeling I can't even begin to describe. This will be an experience I will keep close to my heart for the rest of my life.
In my small town, mass transit means a few pickup trucks parked at the Dairy Queen. But on the youth tour, we got to ride the Metro, Washington, D.C.'s subway system. It was really cool being packed into cars like sardines and hanging on for dear life from the ceiling rails. Wait until they see this back home.
Arlington National Cemetery is the final resting place for more than 200,000 American soldiers who fought in wars from the Revolution to Desert Storm. No matter what direction you look at the headstones, they are in rows. This symbolizes that the troops are still in formation and waiting to defend America if she needed them.
Freedom is not free. It requires sacrifice, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice. Since I plan to make a career out of the military, laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier was especially memorable to me. As the bugler was playing taps, I couldn't help but think about the men who were honored here. I wondered what were their names. It was at that moment that the inscription on the tomb really struck home. Known, but to God.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the youngest president this country ever had. In my opinion, he was the best. His untimely death on a Dallas street shocked the nation. The eternal flame at his gravesite reminds us all of the light he casts for a short time. May we never forget.
You've seen it on TV and in the movies, but until you actually stand at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial, you can't really appreciate how large and beautiful that it is. The eyes of the statue seem to follow you no matter where you go. It was his vision of America as a mighty nation that led to the reality we live today.
My visit to the Vietnam War Memorial is something I will never forget. As I stood looking at the statue of the three soldiers, they seemed to be alive. At the wall, I made a rubbing of a name. I didn't know who he was, but I felt something while I was doing it. Like by simply being there, he was not forgotten. The futility of war strikes home when you look at the more than 58,000 names on the wall and realize that's all that's left of young men who were not much older than me.
The Korean War was fought in the early 1950s. It was almost a half a century later before these soldiers were honored by a memorial set up in our nation's capital city. It is one of the more unusual memorials, which has a squad of life-size soldiers moving through a rice paddy. In the fading daylight, you can almost picture yourself there with them.
The last stop on our memorials tour was the Jefferson Memorial, which honors the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Standing there looking at that statue made me think of how fortunate this country has always been to have outstanding people when they were needed.
Lookout Mountain, Tennessee is the last stop on our youth tour, and the place where we hold our final Sunday devotional. As we ride a cable car almost a mile into the sky, the clouds are so close you can almost reach out and touch them. At the top, our devotional is moving and somber because we know that soon we'll have to say goodbye to all our new friends.
Well, that's the youth tour. 12 exciting days of memorials, music, memories, and more. So do whatever it takes to be here next June, because this trip is definitely the experience of a lifetime.